Can you give us a sense of the enormity of these elections?
It's a humongous exercise because more than 970 million people are eligible to cast the vote.
Give us a sense of how it's being observed from Taiwan's perspective.
People in Taiwan now, they are paying much more attention to Indian election.
If it's not the BJP, then relationship with Taiwan will not be as robust as it is right now.
Taiwan should have a new policy like an Look India or Act India policy.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. It's a historic year of elections. Taiwan was one of the first countries in 2024 to elect a new president and the legislature. It kicks off more than 50 other nations heading to the polls this year, and this includes the world's largest exercise in democracy, the Indian elections. In today's episode, we'll be discussing what these polls say about the future of the country with Sriparna Pathak, an associate professor with OP Jindal Global University in New Delhi, and what it means for foreign policy, in particular relations with Taiwan. And for that, from Hsinchu, we're joined by Fang Tien-sze, a former Taiwan diplomat who was in India and currently the Deputy Director of the Center for Indian Studies at the National Tsinghua University. Thank you both so much for being on the program. I'm going to start with you, Sriparna. You're based in Delhi. Is that where you're casting your ballot? And can you give us a sense of the enormity of these elections?
Originally, I'm not from Delhi. My voting rights till before this was in the eastern part of India, but I got it shifted to Delhi. It's a humongous exercise because more than 970 million people are eligible to cast the vote. We are doing it in phases. It's so huge that it has to be done in phases because 970 million plus people, when all of us go to cast our votes, it's humongous. Plus there are security threats, plus managing the whole exercise is a humongous issue, which is why it's the world's most expensive elections as well. The biggest and the most expensive.
Indeed, it is great to see. Tien-sze, let's talk about from your point of view, these Indian elections. Give us a sense of how it's being observed from Taiwan's perspective.
Okay, I think compared to earlier time, people in Taiwan now, they are paying much more attention to Indian election, also Indian development. So actually many people this time they are watching which party will again secure the majority in parliament or not. And also many people are concerned with the, just as Sriparna just mentioned, this is a huge democratic exercise on the earth. But because the Taiwan and India have some different electronic systems. So we are, for example, India now using electronic voting machines, but in Taiwan we don't have this kind of assistance. So this kind of matter also attract people attention here. And the other aspect, because due to the warmer Indian-Taiwan relations, so that's why. For example, many Taiwanese companies, they are now consider moving out of China, and they maybe want to consider to have some more investment in India. So they need to know the political situation in India. So that's why this time they're watching very closely about the Indian relations.
Sriparna, we talk about this electronic voting system, and we're going to get those results pretty quickly given the size of these elections. But what are the hot button, if you had to narrow it down to about 2 points, what are the two main issues people will be voting for?
The two main issues that people would want to vote for are development and welfare. So because under this government in particular, there has been a development. Our growth rates at the moment are amongst the highest in the world. So development definitely matters. Employment matters. A lot of welfare schemes also have been announced. Some of them are in place. Some of them are yet to kick off. So whichever party gives people the biggest space to have, bigger choices and better choices in their own lives as Indian citizens would be the party which would be getting the votes.
Having lived in India, can you explain how free and fair and transparent the process is, especially when you look at how Taiwan conducts its elections?
Actually, I just visited India, say, 4 weeks ago. I also discussed the election issue with my friend there. Even I discussed the issue with the taxi driver when I to the Ubers. My feeling is actually, I think most Indian friends, they are very confident in their democratic systems. But of course, there are also some concern, like the before the election, the arrest of some political figures. So maybe some friends they have a different opinion about this one. But generally, I think people are quite. They have a strong belief in Indian democratic system.
All right, before we go further, I just want to quantify the sheer size of this vote, in which around 10% of the world's population are eligible to participate in. Here's a look at how India votes and how a government is chosen, along with some key, if not staggering, figures.
India votes to elect a new government once in every 5 years. Nearly 970 million people in the country of 1.4 billion are eligible to vote in the 2024 election, making up an electorate which is more than the populations of the United States, the European Union and Russia combined. India uses electronic voting machine or EVM instead of paper ballots. Paper voting is still used in Taiwan and many of the Western democracies including the US and Canada. The whole country is divided into 543 electoral constituencies or seats, covering each of India's 28 states and 8 union territories. The party or the alliance reaching the halfway mark of 272 seats will be eligible to form the new government. 8 national parties and 57 state parties are in the race this year. Polling has been unfolding over 7 phases, spreading across 6 weeks due to the sheer size of the electorate and the geographical vastness of the world's most populous country. The first phase took place on April 19th, followed by 5 more in April and May. The 7th and the final phase of polling is scheduled for June 1st. The ballots from all the 7 phases will be counted on June 4th and the final results will be announced within a few hours in the same day. Led by 2-term incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party-led National Democratic Alliance is vying for a 3rd successive term. On the other hand, India's oldest political party, the Indian National Congress, is spearheading the multi-party Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance to stop Modi and regain power after 2 consecutive 5-year terms. These elections are not just the world's biggest, but also the world's most expensive. With Neliu, Shubhampal for Connected.
Sriparna, according to India election rules, like in Taiwan, eligible voters can only cast ballots in their constituencies. Now, how much of an issue is that, as India has a large migrant worker population, and many of them are laborers that may not be able to go home due to the cost of it or the sheer size of the country?
That is true. that has been a problem, because of which a lot of people do not end up casting their votes. Now, the right to vote is not enforceable, so people can or cannot vote. It's up to them. It's a voluntary choice. But a lot of migrants have not been able to vote. Now, the solution to this is the internet, and it is now easy to switch your voting rights from one constituency or from one place to the other. If you've lived in your place of residence for 5 years, you can very easily, using the internet, switch. That being said, there are challenges because not a lot of lower skilled laborers would be able to read or write. But again, there's a solution to that.
Taiwan, as we mentioned, also requires voters to go back to their constituencies. And while Taiwan is not as huge, it is a problem for certain diaspora. Is Taiwan watching this or trying to learn from this? And is there a sense that things can change in Taiwan with regards to voting?
I find more and more Taiwanese, they are now interested in electronic voting machines because some argue that maybe some of the chips are made in Taiwan. So we made the chips, but we did not use this kind of machine. It's quite interesting. So, and this may be more efficient. They can more timing efficient, and also is easier for the vote accounting. So we try to learn and watch, and if this in the future we also can have this kind of a system in Taiwan.
Sriparna, you mentioned how the internet can try and even the playing field here, but it's also one of the modes for disinformation, especially with the power of social media. Can you talk about the role of disinformation in these elections and if it has had any impact?
Microsoft came up with a report which stated that India is at the highest risk of disinformation in this election season. Now, disinformation is done not just by external actors, but by our own political parties as well. But going into the foreign interference aspect of it, it's a drip effort. It's a long-term thing, and it has been taking place for at least the last 1 year, trying to portray certain political parties and the dominant political party in a certain light, incapable of being able to address Indian voters' aspirations or their needs, etc. How that is done, specific fissures in the Indian society are chosen, and there is a narrative which is created that the ruling party supports only a particular class or a particular caste or a particular section of the society. Is that true or not? Well, it's up to the people of India to decide. But yes, there is foreign interference.
Here in Taiwan, is there much conversation about the ruling BJP party? And is there a preference for any party to win in India?
I think people here, most people in Taiwan, they don't know Indian politics very much. But Prime Minister Modi now is a very popular international leaders. So people know Modi, know BJP more than Congress. Because if you ask people who is the former Prime Minister before Mr. Modi, I think very few people get this kind of idea. But now it's quite different because India is rising, and also I think most people consider Mr. Modi is a very capable leader and with strong leadership. So I will not say they prefer which party, but I will just say they maybe think they have more knowledge about current government. So for Taiwanese company, if they want to invest in India, of course they maybe prefer the BJP still continue in power. So many policy will continue.
Sriparna, one of the Modi's government has come under scrutiny. They've won 2 terms and they're likely to win a third. And Amnesty International says one of the biggest issues in the run-up to these elections is a crackdown on peaceful dissent and opposition, saying it's reached crisis point. Terrorism and financial loss, they say, have been weaponized, and we've seen this with the Congress Party's funds being frozen before the election, and the popular Delhi Chief Minister Kejriwal also going to jail over a long-term investigation, although now he's out campaigning. Is there a sense in India within itself that there might be a crackdown or might be an attempt to try and give the BJP a favorable outcome?
First of all, there are a lot of rights bodies which keep clamoring on India's human rights records. But unfortunately, these are biased because, when they do say things about India's human rights records, what is missing is how Washington's reputation has been damaged by repressions during demonstrations or the pro-Palestinian, student camps, etc. So that is missing. So a lot of these clamoring which happen against India, these are biased, first, to begin with that. Second, coming to Congress, the reason as to why the Modi government first, got voted to power was because people got tired by the corruption which the Congress had engaged in forever. Since largely from 1947 onwards, the Aam Aadmi Party or Kejriwal came to power because they said that they are against corruption. Which corruption were they talking about, really? So Kejriwal is out on bail, and Indians believe in the judiciary. Politics or political parties may come and go, but our judiciary stays forever. So, and the judiciary does the right thing. So it has allowed Mr. Kejriwal to be, out on bail till the elections don't get over.
While I do agree the rest of the world really needs to look at its own human rights record, and there are many other countries who are clamoring who should look within. Let's take a look at press freedom. There have been human rights monitors, as you said, have tracked erosions in several of India's key institutions, starting with press freedom. Out of 180 countries, India has been ranked 159 in the World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders. That's dropped about 21 spots since Modi took power in 2014. How concerned are you about this?
So to answer this, I'll give you this quick example of Australian journalist Avani Das, who stirred up a storm when she claimed that she was asked to leave India because of her reporting a charge that the center has called misleading. But okay, the center is center. It could be, Indian politicians. But it's not just the center. Australian officials themselves said that Ms. Diaz chose to leave India out of her own will.
Again, you're giving us a narrative of one high-profile person. There are many journalists on the ground who have been targeted for even reporting on things that are not necessarily political. And the reality is, it is harder to be a journalist in India today than it was a decade ago. How much of a concern is it in playing up in these elections?
It's harder to be a journalist in any part of the country because you do get arrested for covering things in any part of the world. In the world's oldest democracies as well. It's difficult being a journalist, and I'm pretty sure you all being journalists would know that. India is not an exception. It's the same across the world. As more hardline governments come to power, this has been the norm. What does the Indian citizen himself or herself get by casting his or her vote? That is the main concern here. Do we get welfare policies? Yes or no? Is there a crackdown upon journalists? That would be secondary. That is not a concern for us. And, these narratives which come against the BJP government, it just ensures that the common citizen who can read these narratives coming out from the West or from the East, that ensures that the BJP is doing something right. And that, in fact, helps people vote more for the BJP. So it's counterproductive when these narratives come out about human rights violations.
Okay, so before we move on, let's get a flavor of the two main contenders for India's top job. Narendra Modi, who has just finished 2 terms, many say on track for a 3rd, and Rahul Gandhi from the opposition Congress Party. Take a listen.
24 का ये चुनाव मजबूत भारत बनाने के लिए है और 24 का ये चुनाव उन ताकतों को परास्त करने के लिए है जो भारत को कमजोर करना चाहती है।
लड़ाई इस किताब की है। ये जो है ना, इसके बिना हिंदुस्तान नहीं बच सकता। ये जो किताब है, ये आपकी किताब है, ये आपकी रक्षा करती है।
Okay, let's move on to the economy there, as that was just mentioned. Tien-sze, we've seen the likes of Foxconn, which makes iPhone, and Apple moving their supply chains to India as part of the China Plus One. Do you expect to see more of that? And especially under which administration is this likely to continue as we go forward with a new president, or maybe, prime minister, or maybe another term for the current prime minister?
As you mentioned, many Taiwanese companies, including Foxconn, they are moving to India, but in addition to this, I want to also mention actually I think still other important area of potential for 2 countries is agriculture. People, because there are around 40 to 50% Indian friends, their work is related to agricultural sectors. And Taiwan is quite good at agricultural, we say high value agricultural products. So I think we can cooperate on this kind of things. But so far, as you just mentioned, it's more IT company. They are looking for new place to invest. So actually, some of my friends just asked me this morning. They just want to open a new branch in Mumbai. So now they are saying they have some new logos, but they are afraid they maybe don't know Indian culture so much. So they are asking me if some kind thing they should avoid when they design this kind of logos, or maybe some color, or maybe some religious issue there. So it's happening. But for Taiwanese company, they are also concerned is like they think the Indian labor law is too complicated, and also is the infrastructure. Maybe some local state they can offer some incentive to Taiwan's company.
Sriparna, China is still a major trading partner for India. India still relies on China for many critical products for its growth and development. So in that sense, what would a BJP win mean for India-Taiwan relations?
Interesting question. So, if you look at the manifestos of the two dominant parties, it becomes clear as to how each party wants its relationship or India under its guidance to be dealing with China. Now, the BJP in its manifesto has talked about accelerating the development of infrastructure along the India-China border. It's not talked directly about China per se, probably because it wants to steer clear of the controversies right now. Meanwhile, the opposition or the India alliance, it's criticized BJP for not being more assertive in its China stance and so on. However, it has also said that it wants to have a sort of friendship with Pakistan and China. So if the other party comes to power, then relations with China might, at least that's what they say, they don't want it to be as antagonistic as it is right now. How that is going to happen no one really knows, because the antagonism comes from China. Now, if there is a party which comes to power which says it wants to be friends with China, then relationships with Taiwan will definitely take a back seat, because it's going to fully follow the one China policy, and it's going to start, probably going to reduce all the outreach which the Modi government has done with vis-a-vis Taiwanese companies or vis-a-vis the ruling DPP party and so on. So if it's not the BJP, which is a very difficult proposition, all the indicators seem that it's going to be the same party again. If it's not the BJP, then relationship with Taiwan will not be as robust as it is right now.
And to your point, Sriparna, about outreach, over the past few years, India's tensions with China have grown, while ties with Taiwan have become warmer. Madha Das Nalapat, the Vice Chair of Manipal Advanced Research Group India, tells us more.
Prime Minister Modi is now made sure that fellow democracies, United States, the United Kingdom, now Taiwan, for example, he has broken precedent by being the first Indian Prime Minister to openly mention Taiwan, openly talk about the need for cross-strait peace. I don't think it's ever happened before. So I'd like to say that this is for the first time that you're seeing Taiwan openly mentioned at the highest level of government. And I think that's a very significant move by the Prime Minister, because he is looking at India and Taiwan coming together. You can call it IT, in a very strong partnership which will develop tech, education, and so many other fields. So he's looking at Taiwan as a very important partner for the future of the India that he's visualizing, which is basically an advanced country with social equity.
Sriparna, traditionally foreign policy hasn't played much of a role in when voters cast their ballots. Is it any different in this election? And is there anything people are looking off, in particular outside of just India, domestic issues?
There's a very clear-cut attempt in the BJP's manifesto on projecting brand India. Now, projecting brand India definitely is tied with foreign policy, because, in the election manifesto, you see that it's championing the UN's declaration of June 21st as the International Yoga Day, exporting Ayurveda, the G20, the successes, and so on. Now, the Congress and CPIM, which are part of the India alliance, they make no such pledges. But there is an attempt from the BJP side to get in foreign policy. At the G20, there were different sorts of meetings and different sorts of events which went down to the most rural parts of India, so that the common person from rural India as well, who might not have the best of education, also understands that foreign policy and domestic policy are deeply intertwined. And if India has to develop, both of these have to go, in tandem. So foreign policy is becoming important.
Tien-sze, I'm going to give you the last word here. As we said, Taiwan has just inaugurated a new president. Where do you see Lai Ching-te taking relations with India, especially as India goes into a new administration itself? Do you feel like there is impetus, and where do you see possible partnerships?
I think we always have a very high expectation about Indian-Taiwan relation and India, but sometimes I feel Indian government, even under the BJP, sometimes maybe too cautious in develop more political engagement with Taiwan. For example, when we're talking about India and Taiwan, we share similar concern regarding rising China. And we have suggested earlier, India maybe can send a military attaché to their mission in Taipei, but this not happen still now. And for the our new president Lai Ching-te, it's still not sure what's his policy toward India now, because earlier during Tsai Ing-wen administration we have the new South-Zone policy, and we put Indian. Actually, India is the more important pillar of new South-Zone policy. My suggestion for new government is actually we should take India out of the new South-Zone policy, because India is too big and too special. So maybe Taiwan should have a new policy like Look India or Act India policy. I think we should have the specified.
Looks like both new administrations will have a lot of new territory to cover. Thank you both so much for this great discussion. Sriparna Pathak, Associate Professor of OP Jindal Global University, speaking to us from New Delhi, and Fang Tien-sze, Deputy Director of the Center for Indian Studies at the National Tsinghua University, speaking to us from Hsinchu. And for our viewers everywhere, it has been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you'd like to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.